That's lovely, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just to let you know that because of the volume of attendees, we've set this Zoom webinar up so that you'll just see the speakers and hear from us. So if you're sat at home wondering if we can see you or not, fear not, you can sort of sit and just put your feet up and relax. But if you do have any questions, please could you raise them using the Q&A function, which should be on your control panel. That will allow us to manage the questions. We ask you not to use the chat for that because we can't then sort of show if they've been answered or not. So please, like I say, use the Q&A function, then we can sort of make sure we manage them and keep track of what we've answered and what we still need to cover. The webinar is being recorded, so we'll send out a recording afterwards. So if you want to sort of watch back again or share it with colleagues, then you're more than welcome to. So thank you for joining us. This is our research office sort of oriented webinar, really to talk about the funding opportunities that we're launching on the new UKRI Funding Service. There's lots of exciting new developments that we wanted to talk to you about. So highlighting our recent developments and the opportunities that we're now running, to explain the role of research office administrators and what you can and what you'll need to do to support applicants. And we'll give you a demonstration of one of the opportunities that's been set up on the funding service as well, and really give you an opportunity to ask us questions. But you're not limited to this window of opportunity to contact us. If you do have questions, we have a help desk. We'll share the details of that later if you don't already have those. So yeah, please don't treat this as your only opportunity to reach out. I'm joined by a couple other speakers this afternoon as well. We have Paul Wellington-Green, who is our Senior Product Manager, and Sarah Ball, who is our Funding Policy Lead. Paul's going to be running the demonstration of one of the opportunities, and Sarah will join us for the Q&A questions and answers sort of panel towards the end. So we wanted to give you a little bit of background, and if any of you joined us for our webinar a few weeks ago before we launched a number of opportunities, this will be familiar. But for those of you that weren't part of that, we think it's sort of useful to make sure everybody sort of understands sort of the background and where we're coming from. So a little bit about UKRI, although it's probably not needed given the crowd that we're talking to today, but just in case. So UKRI, UK Research and Innovation, we offer funding and support across all academic disciplines in industrial areas, from medical to biological sciences to astronomy. Our organisation brings together 7 disciplinary research councils: Research England, which is responsible for supporting research and knowledge exchange at higher education institutions in England, and UK's innovation agency, Innovate UK. The Simpler Better Funding Programme, which I will probably from here on refer to as SBF, is delivering a new funding service via a new digital platform that will make it easier for users to collaborate, to submit applications, and to obtain guidance in a joined up way. We're looking to strip back unnecessary bureaucracy, where the effort to complete and/or manage activities is disproportionate to the benefits they bring. We want to free up time both for researchers, innovators, their organisations, yourselves, to really allow you all to focus on the vital work. What's the sort of, making the application the best it can be, rather than all the sort of checking all the sort of various bits of guidance or filling in different boxes and making sure that you have fully understood it if there's sort of discrepancies. We want to ensure that we have the flexibility and agility that enables us to invest in the best ideas and people. And it's important that we ensure and encourage and enable a diverse range of researchers, innovators, peer reviewers, panel members, coming from all parts of our community in terms of the service that we provide. So what I've described is more than just a system, it's a service. It's a digital platform that will eventually replace the current GES grant system, and we're aiming to make your experience aiming to make your experience with UKRI from applying for funding to delivering your research and innovation project as streamlined and as supportive as possible. We want to provide a common experience regardless of the funding opportunity that's being applied to, simplifying funding types and reducing the diversity of the different funding processes and policies across UKRI. We want to reduce the complexity of schemes and calls that you have to navigate or manage, and to have a single digital front door to secure cloud-hosted services, allowing access to users on any network-enabled device. And the data will be collected once and reused as appropriate, and then captured at the right stage where it's needed, rather than asking everybody for everything, just in case. We want to sort of have that much more rational approach so that we're not wasting anybody's time and asking for stuff that might not be needed or needed until later on. And it's key that users are able to access the right data at the right time, really helping them to make informed decisions. So we'll be doing all this gradually, introducing different opportunity types with the functionality to support them, all tested and iterated with users to ensure that it meets theirs and yours and our needs. So in terms of recent developments, for those of you who have been keeping a keen eye on the UKRI's funding finder, you will have noticed that recently we have launched 5 opportunities on the new funding service. These range from, or the majority are sort of quite simple outline style opportunities, which will go from sort of application to decision. And one that's slightly more sort of complicated with finances that will go through to sort of the full journey through to decision, which will include expert peer review as well. With these, this allows us to test a large number of requirements and a wider range of users. So by working with each of the research councils and having a variety of different funding types, it really does help us to understand sort of different approaches and different things that we're implementing and trying. Really, the core part of our ethos as a programme is that we trial approaches and we gather that evidence really to see what's working and what's the best sort of direction to, what's working, what should we do more of and carry on, and where things aren't working quite as we expected, there may be unintended consequences, so where we might need to change and adapt sort of going forward. Excitingly, these are the 5 that are live at the moment. So we had one that we did with AHRC earlier in the year, which is now closed and is being sort of assessed. And we have 5 live at the moment with these councils. And we have one more that we're planning with BBSRC, which will be launched in the new year. That's quite a flurry of activity to happen sort of in quite a short window, but that's going to be it for the time being. We need to really use this as an opportunity to look at what is working with these live opportunities, have that evidence, speak to users, really understand sort of our own processes and sort of what's working with councils as well as yourselves. So after this flurry, there'll be a bit of a pause in terms of new opportunities being launched, but you should see more again in the spring. I think a key thing that I just wanted to highlight as well with these opportunities, what you see being piloted in these might not necessarily be the long-term solution. Because we're introducing the funding service in an agile, iterative way, it's quite, this is our sort of first pass and sort of early build of a lot of the functionality, but there will be a lot more features and functionality to come that will be built sort of as time goes on. So you'll see many more enhancements sort of coming online with the funding service. So a lot of things that you might be expecting in terms of sort of capability. Hopefully everything that you're hoping for will come in time. But as I say, we're building it, we're testing what works, and what we'll see will sort of grow and improve over time. Right, that's probably enough for me just for the moment, and I'm going to hand over to my colleague Paul, who is going to give you a demonstration.
Thank you, Suze. Right, let me just share my screen. So where the journey really starts is on the funding finder. So we can see here the ESRC opportunity, and this is the one I'm going to demo today. What you won't really see any difference on the funding finder, apart from we make it clear that this is going to be using the funding service. But how you get from the funding finder to the funding service is essentially the start application button. Behind this button is the URL for our service. So if you were to click that, you will be taken to a page like this. And this really is the applicant journey that we're focusing on now. So the first half of this sort of demo, I focus on the applicant journey. And then for the second half, I focus on the research office journey. And what's just to stress the bit that Suze was talking about there is, this really is just trialing some opportunities. This really is an opportunity to test and learn. There are some features here or some ways in which we work that we know isn't going to be our medium or long-term future or vision, but we're using it as a mechanism to test and learn so that we can ultimately iterate and grow the product to the user need, that we can really evidence that user need. I think for quite a lot of you in the university sector, and looking at the job market, quite a number of universities are moving to agile iterative development. So this might not be very new to you. But I think I want to stress that because I think in the first webinar, we've got lots and lots of questions about, well, this wasn't here, that wasn't here, why you've taken us all away. And just to reassure you, we haven't. We've put these opportunities out, these first half, as an opportunity to test and learn about some things that are really important to us, about what we've built to date. And we know they're not the things for the future, that we will desperately need to scale and grow features before we can really throw many opportunities at that. So I just want to reassure you that what you see today is not the medium or even the long-term direction. And actually, by the time you see any number of scale coming into TFS, it will be very, very different. So as an applicant, I'm going to show that I do have an account. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to sign in. It's very easy to create an account. For those that will need it, it's as simple as associating an organization and choosing a first name, last name, and an email address, and verifying your account. And I'm sure some of you would have done that as our RO user already. And it's important to say at this point, we do not have the functionality to approve users of the service. So I think in JES, you'll be very used to approving a new investigator or a new principal investigator or a co-investigator. We don't have that functionality yet. We know we need to do it. And so it's just not something that we have now, but it's something that we will have in the future. So let me just log on. That's what I need. Right, so first thing you will notice as an applicant, if you created an application before, you are asked to whether you want to create a new one or you want to create that one that you started. You won't get this message as the first time you've created an application. I'm going to start a new one afresh. I get to associate myself to many organizations or look them up if I wanted to. Now here, this is essentially the form. This is the homepage of the application. You'll notice, unlike JES, you don't have to search for the scheme, search for the cool name, which might be different to what's on the website. That URL that's on the funding finder will direct you straight to the application once you've logged in, of course. So really, I'm not going to talk you through all of these question sets because it's not really about, it's not me talking about the ESRC opportunity, it's me talking about the funding service. So what I want to show you really is a number of questions And so the very first one is just some narrative type questions that we have. So the idea that, I guess, JES is very attachment driven. And one of the core principles as TFS is that we move to a more digital application form. And that means collecting narrative in a digital form. That is quite crucial to our design because there are a number of pains that this will eradicate throughout the process, both for the applicant, for the research office, for reviewers, for panel members, and not least internal staff. So we really are testing the idea of a digital application form. And so these 5 opportunities really is to try and showcase that. And so we'll be asking applicants and research office what they think about the idea of digitizing an application form. But in order to digitize an application form, what you will see is there's no longer this idea of a case support attachment. Instead, what we've got is a number of fields, some of which might look and be representative of what a case for support attachment might be. Others, they have broken them down into a subset of questions. And this ESRC one has done that. It's taken the traditional case for support attachment and broken it down into a number of digital questions. You will see here, the guidance is behind this link. It's all on page. What we're really trying to do is to make the experience of applying that much better by having everything that you need in order to fill in that box on this page. There should be no reason to go anywhere else for in order, to go to some research councils guidance pages, to go to the JES help pages, go back to the funding finder. It really all should be contained on this one page. So you have guidance here about how to fill in that question. From a research office perspective, this guidance is also replicated on the funding finder. So if you want to support applicants, the information on the funding finder should be enough. However, from the minute the applicant creates their application against your associated organization, that application will be viewable to you. And you will see this view that the applicant can see. So you'll be able to see the question that they're populating and see the guidance. So if you want to support them in their application as they see it on the screen, you can also do that. We've got this rich text editor concept. So inside this box, you can do some headings, some paragraph notations, you can bold, you can italicize, you can underline, you can indent, you can do numberings, and you can do bullets, and you can do tables. In the future, we will be expanding the functionality of our rich text editor to include stuff like embedded images, stuff like math markup languages and chemistry markup languages. So things that you would see typically in a case for support where people have the freedom to do that. One of the parts we learned when we took this out for user research early was that we absolutely needed those extra functionality in order to really support a digital application form. And so though we don't have it in these opportunities, because we wanted to get these opportunities out now to test some of the more fundamental things, embedded images, different markup languages are coming in the future. Because we don't have some of those functionalities now, we will be supporting attachments. And like I say, the long-term ambition is that we move away from attachments because we want to release these opportunities fairly early in our development lifecycle in order to test and learn. We will be having attachments that support images, markup languages, and so forth. And so you will see this on some of the pages. I'll show you exactly how that looks on the FEC question, which is one of the other questions I wanted to show you. The second question I wanted to show you was really about adding the team. So the person will be defaulted in the team role here, whoever created the application, and they'll be asked to assign a role. And they will be able to go ahead and create a co-applicant. And there will be some information that they need to populate. and associating themselves to the university and giving themselves a role. So that's as simple as creating a co-investigator. At this stage, the co-investigator is notified that they are part of the application, but they cannot create an account and onboard themselves. That's going to be a later journey. Also, what we know is a need, and we will respond to later, is the ability for the organisation of that co-investigator to also see the application and be involved. That is something that we do want to support, and it's not something that we've forgotten about. It is a need we will support in the future. So to go on to the FEC question, the cost question. Research, UKRI is really wanting to trial how we collect finances. It's probably quite clear that how we collect finances now in GES is far from ideal. It goes into way too much detail than what we need for assessment and application purposes. And that's not to say that we don't expect the research organisation and the applicant to go to that level of detail. It's just it doesn't need to be in the application form just yet. And so what we really are trialling for these 5 opportunities is a different way of collecting finances. So rather than coding a page, we're just using an attachment as a basis to trial and learn. That attachment is very short term. Once we've done some experimentation with that, that will turn into a web page, which we would have validation and calculations on, as you would expect. But for now, it is a simple attachment. So justification of resources is a digital form, but you can see that the actual template that we're using, you have to download, and you click that link and you download it, and it downloads it as a Word form, and it's very simple. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, just to say that it's quite a simple form. It doesn't have many calculations on it, and there's a number of reasons why it doesn't. But I think the important thing is not to get hung up on the thing that, oh my God, you're moving to an attachment with no calculations. This is just a short-term trial. We want to trial some different formats of collecting costs when we've got a bit more robust evidence as to say exactly how we should collect costs. That will be turned into a web page with full validation and full calculations are implemented. So those are a couple of questions that you will see. I think one of the other things that I wanted to point out is that you have the ability to download the application form. So both you as the research office and as the applicant. And the way to do that is on this read application tab. So one of the other things that we learned through digitizing or talking about digitizing the application form with users early on was this ability to absolutely be in control of what the application form looks like when presented to assessors. And so we have this read tab, which presents exactly what they filled in on the previous tab here. There's this slight error where some of the tabs go over this read-only screen. We're aware of this error, and this is being fixed, if not this sprint, next sprint. So you won't see this for very long, but it's just an error that we noticed when we went live last week, but it will be fixed very shortly. But to download, you have the download option here, and essentially you just be able to, you get a pop-up dialog box where you can either print or save as PDF, and both either you in the research office or the applicant can do that. So to hop over to what a research office view looks like now, just sign in. So again, I think what's important to know, and through the HRC user research we did for the pilot we ran in the summer, we already know that what we have here for the research office functionality is very, very basic. And stuff around the GES pool structures, the ability to see what your colleagues are working on and who's dealing with what. We know that need, and we will be responding to that need. So we're not going to lose the GES pool structures or something that's akin to GES pool structures, but essentially the ability to route applications from certain departments and schools to certain groups of people. And at this stage, we've only got one submitter pool, or one, we don't have the approver pool concept. And again, if that's something that we need in the future, we'll be responding to that need accordingly. It's important to say that UKRI does support many organisations. Of course, universities are a big stakeholder of us, but whatever we develop has to work for charities, museums, sole traders, large enterprises. So there's always this awareness of being able to have TFS work for all different types of organisations, not just large intensives. I've used this user in the past, and I've actually created an application under this user's name. So what you'll see here, if you're a research office user, you will probably, in most cases, get defaulted to your organisation view. But we've created this concept that you have a personal view and organisation view because we recognise that actually some of you probably will be submitting applications on behalf of your organisation, because there are some opportunities that we run across UKRI that are done at an organisation level, not at a sort of researcher level. So we have this personal view where you can see the applications that you're involved in. In most cases, many of you will be defaulted to this organisation view, certainly for the short term. So we have our dashboard here. That one there just sort of says how many are currently have a status of with research office. Again, what we learned from the Next Generation Thinkers pilot was that actually that metadata on that tab needs to be much richer. Actually, on this page, we need sorting, we need filtering, we need a way of grouping, and all of these things that I think we had awareness of anyway, but are certainly things that we will be acting on in the future, certainly before we chuck any scale at the funding service. So what you will see here is every application that has been associated to your organization. So those that have only been created and those that have finished. So all those statuses. We certainly don't wait for it to be submitted to the research office in order for you to view it. But we do note the fact that at the present time, that's not particularly useful when actually you can't filter or sort or group into different schools and faculties. But this idea that you get very early visibility was a pain that came out quite early in our discovery research that we really wanted to act on from the get-go. So let me just find the one. So you can see here that there's a number of statuses, and here this is a different one. Create a different opportunity, but you can see here that it's with the research office, and essentially you've got two actions that you can do. You can either return it to the applicant or you can submit it to UKRI. And it's important to say that there isn't actually any messaging in TFS around the return journey. What we sort of learned was that actually, certainly from the beginning, most of that communication happens offline between the applicant and the research office. I expect we'll respond to that and iterate over time, and there'll be much more messaging in TFS as more users become accustomed to using it. But for now, we expect that communication to happen offline. Also, what we know is that there is a need for the research office to edit an application. There are some very minor things that would be very useful if the research office could do. And so we'll be responding that into the future, recognizing the user need and acting upon it. So we will, in the future, be allowing the research office to edit an application. That's in a return state. Let's go back to one that is in a submission state. Okay, I don't actually have any in the spirit. I've just returned the very one I wanted to submit. So that's rather poor of me. But essentially, that submission journey would just be that you saw the previous button and you would press that button and say, are you sure you want to submit to UKRI? And you would be able to submit. I think the only thing worth mentioning is at that stage, submission is final. We want to move to once an application is received, we start processing that application. So there is no mechanism in order to return and for you to carry on working, even if the date hasn't passed. Submission is final. So I can just see Susie's face popped up, so she's probably going to tell me to stop waffling and to crack on with the rest of the presentation. So I have actually now covered everything, so I'm going to stop sharing there, and I'm sure that's prompted lots and lots of questions.
Thank you, Paul. That was really useful. Yeah. Thank you for picking up on the subtle hint of me appearing as well. It's grand. I think it's really important to be able to actually show everybody what we've built. And if you have already sort of registered and gone on and had a play around, you might not have perhaps sort of seen or understood what the next stages in the process were. So I believe that's given you a really good overview of what to expect sort of as you support applicants through the process. So there's just a couple extra points, many of which Paul has covered in his presentation, but just to sort of reiterate, hopefully that's sharing the correct screen. Is that sharing my slides? No one's telling me otherwise. Grand. So as Paul said, around sort of the costs and the justifications about how these need to be, the costs are to be uploaded using a PDF, that we are asking for less information. We've sort of rationalised that down compared to what we would ask for in JES. But the instructions of how to use to do that are sort of very clear within the service, as well as sort of the guidance there. Another thing we want to quickly highlight on the ESRC opportunity is that for this particular opportunity, applicants won't be asked to nominate reviewers for this time. Some general points about our other applications as well. Yes, we want to make sure, a key thing for us in doing these is ensuring that there is greater consistency across the opportunities that we're piloting, but there are some differences as we want to try some different ways of working, some different approaches, really, so we can, sort of, as we said before, learn from what works and what sort of the best options are, and sometimes that might be a couple of options, but where those differences are, or where there's a specific policy that needs to be adhered to, that really should be highlighted within the guidance and the core document on the funding finder. If you're unsure, please do contact the help desk. If there is any sensitive information that needs to be provided to us as part of anybody applying, that should go to the support desk marked as a confidential email. But please also include the application reference number. As Paul said, once you submit the application to us, you won't be able to recall it after the fact. Just to say as well, so again, Paul sort of covered a lot of this in the demonstration, but wanted to just highlight around sort of the role of administrators, if you've had an administrator account set up. When an applicant creates an account, their organisation leads JES contacts will be contacted and invited to nominate essential staff to register as administrators. And we say essential staff because it's only a handful of opportunities at the moment. We don't need, and you probably don't want all research office colleagues to set up an account just yet. It's about sort of, we're starting small, and then as we do scale up later next year, we'll be inviting more and more people. When we did our first pilot opportunities with AHRC, we did try and sort of keep that down to sort of 2 contacts per organisation. We know that that's not entirely practical for a lot of organisations, especially now that we've got additional opportunities. It might be that different people need to support these, but you might also need more people given sort of the breadth of remit. So, we hear that loud and clear. So if you do need an account, there is a verification process, but please do contact our help desk. In terms of your role, you'll have, once you're set up with an administrator account, you have visibility of all the applications created for your organisation. You'll have sole responsibility for the submission to UKRI, or you and the other administrators will. So if you do have any internal deadlines, please do make yourselves aware, please do make your applicants aware of who you are and what those sort of deadlines might be, so that there's no sort of last minute surprises when it comes to deadline day. Your contact details will be shared with the applicants on request and by email automatically if it's been returned for editing. But again, best to sort of make yourself known to those applicants, because you'll be able to see them once they start their applications. So I think really we wanted to sort of give plenty more time to the questions, and I can see we've got lots that have come in, so that's fantastic. Yeah, just in summary, before we get to that, we're working to an agile, iterative process. So the more opportunities we run on the funding service, the more enhancements and more sort of functionality will continue to develop. The opportunities that you see today are all clearly identified within the funding finder, that they will be on the new funding service rather than GES. If you're a nominated administrator, or you need to be, please do get in touch, and we'll make sure you're set up with an appropriate account. And really, it's really so important that we have your feedback. We look at all these questions that we get in through the webinars, but also in terms of user research and sort of the queries that come into the help desk. So here's the details of the help desk. Phone number, we have a crack team or a crack unit sort of behind the scenes, sort of ready and waiting to support you there. And each of the call documents also sort of provide those details. And as I was saying, user feedback and our user research really does drive what we're doing on the funding service. So if you want to sign up to be part of our user research, then please do. We'll provide that link as well. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm actually going to ask Sarah to introduce herself, as you've not met her yet.
Thanks, Suze. Yes, as Sue said at the beginning of the presentation, my name is Sarah Ball. I'm a funding policy lead in UKRI Funding Policy team, and very happy to answer any questions that you might have about policy. Thanks, Suze.
Thank you. So Mark, behind the scenes, has been coordinating our questions as we come in. What's our first one, Matt?
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. We've had loads of really interesting questions come through, and colleagues have been upvoting those so we can see which ones are important to people as well. So we'll start off with some questions. There's a whole host of questions around the processes for research support teams to register accounts and so on. So perhaps, Paul, I could ask you to pick up on that. Are we requiring individuals to register accounts with the new funding service? Can we use shared email accounts to set up the research office account? How does it work?
Yeah, so at this stage, we're really trying to look for personal accounts, largely because it's really best practice around security is that we don't share passwords to secure digital platforms, and you'll know that throughout other places. So what we really want to do is do a bit more, and we'll be probably doing this next year, a bit more deep dive on exactly how research offices use a shared mailbox, and actually can we recreate some of that functionality whilst keeping it nice and secure with personal accounts. So that's the current approach. Of course, if it means that we can't meet that need, then we're open-minded to change. But at the moment, we're trying to figure out how, whilst using personal accounts, can we meet the needs that a shared mailbox or a shared account does today.
Great, thank you. And a couple of related questions. So when we bring data over from GES, or when we ask people to stop using GES and start using the funding service a lot more, will we be bringing data across, specifically user accounts and departments that they might have set up within the old system?
So presently, no, except live awards. That's the only thing that we're planning on bringing across to TFS. Again, we need to probably learn and understand what it is about the previous data that organizations like. I can understand possibly they might not want to redo the pool structures, and that might be useful. But it depends on how we actually recreate that, because we might not recreate that exactly, and therefore we couldn't possibly migrate. So at presently, other than the award data, no plans, but again, we will understand the user need and react to it accordingly.
Thank you very much. And we mentioned in the first version of this webinar a few weeks back what the timeframes were. So obviously we're introducing a small number of opportunities at the moment. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that will increase over time going forward?
Yeah, so we're on a duration of a couple of years. So throughout 2022, 23, TFS will be scaling up and JES will be scaling down.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, I'll switch now to the questions that have had, I think, the most upvote. So these are really, really critical questions for our audience today, and relating to costings and provision of financial information. So first of all, there's a general comment, not including detailed financial information in the application itself will only create pushback for research offices who will require detailed costings to be produced. Do you have a response to that at all, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, and that's something we want to test and learn about, really, isn't it? And through these 5 opportunities, that's the perfect opportunity to actually figure out and evidence that. And we're open to that, you know. Like I say, if it turns out that that's the case, that we create these perverse behaviors, then yeah, definitely we want to learn and we can respond accordingly. But it is no doubt that we don't need it for the application process. So how can we not collect data that we don't need, but also refrain from creating those perverse behaviors? And that's really the nux of the problem, which only through trialing will we truly understand.
Thank you. And then also on costing, on a detail of how that costing information is submitted, why is the FEC template a Word document? Surely Excel would be better.
Yeah, there are a number of reasons. I mean, mostly Excel would be good for having embedded formula, maybe embedded macros. I mean, you get into all sorts of virus scanning issues when you have formula and particularly macros involved. What I probably failed to point out in the demo is that this current stage, our file upload will only take PDF as a document type. And so the instructions in the guidance will tell users to save it as a PDF. And it's you can get into sort of formatting errors when saving Excel documents. So it is a Word document for now for those purposes, but again, it is only for testing and learning purposes. It will be a full-on web page in the near future.
Thank you, Paul. So there's a question here which relates a little bit to one of the opportunities in particular, and some functionality around collaborating and including COIs within the application. So given the nature of Network Plus, which is the ESRC opportunity going live, and the need for transparency between investigators, why have we chosen not to allow COIs to see the application?
Well, that implies that we've made a conscious decision not to allow it, which we haven't. It's actually our intention that COIs will be very much an active part of the application and will view and see everything in the future. It's just we've yet to develop it. So I think one thing I think important to, maybe this wasn't clear in the intro, is that we are developing this ourselves. So we've not bought something off the shelf and turned things off. Very far from it. We are custom building this, and so the ability to onboard a co-investigator and allow them to see is absolutely something that's in our to-do list that we will do, but we are very keen to get something out early for testing and learning purposes, because it will completely alter the way that we might think about things in the future. So yeah, we definitely have not made a contract. It's not a we will not allow co-investigators here. We do want it. We've just not. It's on our to-do list essentially.
Thank you, Paul. So picking up now on some of the other questions sort of coming through that have been upvoted, and this one might touch on areas around sort of policy and harmonisation. So Sarah, this might be one that you could contribute to. So we've had questioners say, I see that in 2 of the calls currently using the system, ESRC and NERC, the section called Case for Support varies quite a lot in word length, number of images, and so on. So is there scope for confusion over what Case for Support now means? And what will the Case for Support for a typical Research Council responsive mode grant application look like in future in terms of length, attachments, etc.?
Thanks for giving me that one, Mark. Yeah, so I mean, I think first of all to note that those 2 opportunities, so the ESRC Digital Network Plus and the NERC opportunity, are very different in nature. So the NERC opportunity is an outline. This is a 2-stage application process. So they will give a brief outline, and then based on panel feedback, will either be selected to submit a full application or not, as the case may be. Whereas the ESRC opportunity is a very large and opportunity that is going all the way through to a funding decision, where hopefully one successful application will receive a very large support from ESRC. So that's the reason for the difference in the size of the Case for Support. And I think that's consistent with how we do things currently. We would expect much less information for an outline opportunity than we would for an opportunity that was going to a full decision, and that the level of detail would also be dependent on the size, complexity, and nature of that opportunity. So I think the new service actually gives us a real chance to fine-tune what is required in an application in order to make an assessment decision. And as Paul has said a number of times, and Suze has also said, what we're doing here is testing and learning to understand what information do we need, when do we need it, and in what format in order to be able to make an assessment and make a decision. So I anticipate as we develop that we will get a much more standardized approach. You might see a standard outline and a standard research grant and so on and so forth. But I think it's too early to say what a standard responsive mode grant might look like, because we have to understand how these opportunities are working, how people are responding to the digital form, and the best way to actually structure the application questions now that we actually have this digital form that we can use rather than the traditional Case for Support attachment. So I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Sarah, and sorry for throwing you a tricky one. Back to Paul now. On the process for submitting applications, does the Research Office still have to submit every application, or can an academic submit without the Research Office knowledge?
For those organisations that have chosen the Research Office functionality, so we don't force organisations to have Research Office functionality, but once you've invoked it, then everything must be submitted from the Research Office. And the reason it's not mandatory is for like startups, small medium enterprises, charities, galleries. So again, it's that point where we can't treat every organisation we deal with like a research intensive university. But once you have invoked it, yes, only the Research Office can do it.
And Suze, is it worth adding something here about the help desk processes that we've put in place to try and help out research offices with this?
Certainly. So as soon as an applicant creates their account and starts their application, our help desk will sort of monitor that. And if it's a new organisation that hasn't yet been contacted, we'll go to the lead JES contacts that are currently registered to ask, would they, to inform them that an applicant who's started to create their application, and asking them basically, would they like to set up a research office administrator account and for the process that Paul has just described. So we're sort of very proactive in terms of making sure that the research organisation makes that decision as to whether they want that functionality or not.
Thank you very much. There's a question here which is looking at sort of reporting and I guess management information for research offices. Will the research office be able to download metadata from the system to analyse submissions? For example, peaks of submissions, research areas, number of awards, applicants per faculty, etc.
Not presently, but yeah, we'll probably understand more of that as a user need, and if that comes out quite loud and clearly from a number of users, then we can respond to that need.
Thank you, Paul. And going back to details of how the system works or the service works around application submission, we've had a question asking, is it possible to delete an application if you start one but decide not to proceed?
Not yet, but that is in our, again, to-do list to do.
Okay, and I think this question will be a critical one for research offices who are supporting applicants out there. Is there a way of downloading the application as a Word document so the research officer can provide development support?
Well, so I did show the journey to download it as a PDF, so you can support in that way. And again, all that information is repeated on the funding finder, so there should be no limit to you offering support. But generally, the idea of downloading it is Word, so applicants don't have to, or research office have to copy and paste into Google Drive or Word or whatever word processing to work offline. We are aware of that need, and again, that's something that's this to-do list we call a backlog, and so it is on our backlog that we respond to in the future.
Great, thank you very much. Picking up again on some of those roles within the application and submission process. So we've had a question asking for a clarification. Within the current TFS application process, is it only the applicant and the research office who can have access to the application, so no one else can be given access currently? Is that correct?
At this present stage, but only at this present stage. As we iterate, many more people will be able to view and be part of the application and even edit it.
Thank you, Paul. In terms of some of that transition from JES to the new service, we've had a couple of questions around that. So will previously submitted applications in JES still be visible to us as an archive of our organisation's applications? Person who asked that question highlighting that they use those historic applications in a variety of ways.
So we've made no decision either way. So as we get nearer that date of where we might decommission JES, we'll certainly be going out to organisations and understanding how valuable that data is, and ways of which, if it does prove valuable, and which it does sound like it is, then ways in which we can give that to the organisations or make that available in some other repository. So yeah, again, if it comes out as a need, we'll absolutely respond to it.
Yeah, but it's probably worth stressing, right, as you said before, Paul, that users will be using JES for some time still, alongside new opportunities being added into the new funding service.
Yes, it's certainly not going anywhere for the next year and a half.
Great, thank you very much. But for the new funding service, can research admin staff register their accounts now? I think, Susie, you picked up on that a little bit in what you'd said with some of your slides.
Sorry, I was reading the questions and trying to answer them.
I was asking, can research office admin staff register their accounts now?
Yes. by all means, if please do contact the help desk. I put the details in the chat.
Thank you, and sorry for catching you out there as you're reading through those questions. So moving on then a little bit, will the new digital application reduce the level of paperwork involved in standard responsive mode grants, or simply replicate the same level of words into a new digital system?
Go on, Sarah, you could take that one.
I think that's hard to answer precisely at the moment. I think where we are hoping to get to is that we ask for less information, that we only ask for the information that we need in order to make an assessment. Some of that will mean that, things that were perhaps attachments before now become sections on the digital form, but we will really be investigating whether all of that information is really necessary and at what point do we need it. So there may be elements that we only collect if an application is funded, for example. So perhaps, actually reducing the amount of information that we collect up front and making sure that's only for the assessment. I don't know if you want to add anything about the kind of more technical side of things, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, so a certain direction of travel is to move away from attachments. So actual paperwork, yes, in favor of more digital forms. And of course, the more we simplify, the better that experience becomes.
And I think just to add in as well, you'll have noticed that we've had, alongside the AHRC New Generation Thinkers opportunity that ran earlier in the year, each of the councils now will be running opportunities in the new funding service. And as we've worked with them on this, they've taken the opportunity to really look at their processes and make sure they're still doing what they need to do as well, with a view to rationalising, streamlining, making things simpler and better. We've got a couple of minutes left, so we'll try and get through a couple more questions. This one is, again, looking for clarification on how PIs and administrators can work together. So how does a PI grant access to her application to an administrator? And can the administrator submit the application to UKRI once ready, or can this be done only by the PI?
So as it currently stands, anyone who has a research office account for that organisations associated to the PI's organisation will be able to see it from the get-go. So no permission needs to be granted. In the future, we are developing the requirement that allows the PI to invite people in to help edit the application. We're yet to really spec that out, but that might include allowing others to have submission control. But as it currently stands, only the PI can submit to the research office if the research office has that invoke functionality. But they do see it from the get-go.
Great, thank you very much. So we won't be able to get through all of the questions, but we're just going to take one more. How will this eventually tie in with the Innovate portal? Will Innovate move the TFS, or will it still be a two-form submission?
So we're very much under direction of one common system for all of UKRI. So it's likely in the future that there will be a convergence.
That's great. Thank you very much. And thanks again to everyone for submitting those questions. Apologies if we didn't get to yours, but Suze, I'll pass back to you.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much to everyone. We did try and stick to the sort of more general questions. I think given sort of, if we went into lots of detail about each specific opportunity, then certainly an hour would not be long enough. But I think where you have specific questions about particular funding opportunities, certainly please do go to the help desk. But if there's further general questions that you have as well, please direct them to that team as well. Thank you very much for everyone who has joined us today and particularly has stayed to the end. Thank you to my speakers, and I know there's quite a few colleagues sort of listening on this, so thank you to everyone sort of behind the scenes. but also everyone that's been involved in our user research. This is sort of the first of many more, well, not the first, we've done a couple of these webinars already, but there will be sort of further support where there's sort of more information to share with you in the future. So yeah, we look forward to getting your feedback and to continue working with you. Thank you very much.